more than 100 years, American oil and gas has been the fuel of our economy. But along with the oil and natural gas this well produces, there are wastes that must be disposed of safely. These byproducts of oil and gas exploration and production, rock, metal cuttings, drilling fluids, salt water, create their own complicated issues. State officials want to create regulations that protect the public and the environment at a reasonable cost to industry and the state.
We need to figure out a way of doing that that is cost-effective and practical.
Be designed so that they fit the part of the country that you're working in.
The individuals, the industry that's involved, and then the environmental aspects of it, because we live right in the middle of those people.
Oil and gas is produced in more than half of our states, in vastly different terrains and climates. Government officials struggle to create standards that work, coast to coast.
The depth to groundwater, the type of soils, the amount of rainfall, a whole series of other geographic specific things that may in fact make one set of regulations work very well in one part of the country and utterly fail in another part.
There has to be a way of approaching the common problems with a common set of objectives and a common implementation plan at a least cost.
Citizens worry about the health of their children.
We want a clean, healthy world.
Protecting groundwater is a top concern of environmentalists.
The most harmful or the most worrisome avenue for oil and gas waste getting into the environment is through the water resources.
Energy producers want practical regulations they can comply with, and which allow American oil and gas exploration to be competitive.
Right now, the oil and gas industry is caught between falling oil and gas prices and escalating environmental compliance costs. The industry is very concerned that the environmental benefits of any additional regulations be commensurate with their costs.
Governors and state regulators who are responsive to voters attempt to listen to all these voices and balance their concerns.
Was finding that balance between the economic requirements and interests and maintaining viable industries and the environmental interests that we had without adopting the extreme positions that really lead you nowhere except conflict and litigation.
In a decision-making process with 18 million people you have to represent, you have a lot of different views, and you're always trying to find the best available process to come up with the best solution.
But ultimately, you want to make sure that the prosperity of your people is at the centerpiece of any decision and any solution to any problem.
All these voices can be heard. State officials, government officials, the public, environmentalists, energy producers, and diverse viewpoints can come together to find cost-effective answers. For the past 60 years, oil and gas producing states have voluntarily worked together to maximize domestic oil and natural gas production, minimize waste, and protect the environment. Their experience of solving problems by working together at the state level is a model that all of us can learn from. For more than 15 years, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has considered how to best regulate petroleum exploration and production wastes, also known as E&P wastes. In 1988, the EPA reported to Congress that E&P waste should continue to be classified as non-hazardous, and that existing state regulations were adequate. However, the EPA noted that some regulatory gaps existed, and enforcement was not adequate in some states. The EPA pledged to work with the states to address regulatory gaps and help strengthen enforcement. At the urging of governors, the EPA funded an effort by the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission to develop guidelines for E&P waste management. As an organization of energy-producing states, the IOGCC is uniquely suited to lead this effort. Historically, states have sought to keep regulation of oil and gas production at the state level, feeling their knowledge of their industry, geology, and climate would create the most effective regulation. In 1935, governors created an interstate compact ratified by Congress to address oil and gas issues. It was such a good idea that both Republican and Democratic presidents took credit for it. Now the 29 compact member states account for 99% of domestic petroleum production. The compact promotes conservation and efficient recovery of oil and gas resources while protecting health, safety, and the environment. States fund the majority of the compact's work, and the compact receives no operating funds from the petroleum industry. The IOGCC works with states in creating fair, effective regulation by sharing the latest information and technical expertise.
It's very important that those of us representing oil and gas producing states come together and be able to develop common policy or common suggestions for policy. And I think that the compact permits that.
So when you're talking about oil and gas, it was the natural entity to undertake something like this.
And by sharing their experiences with each other, you're going to be more likely to get and identify the best practices than if any particular state goes it alone.
Forming the Council on Regulatory Needs was the first phase of the Compact Commission's work with the EPA. The Council's mission was to agree on the elements of an effective state E&P waste program. 21 delegates with a variety of backgrounds and viewpoints, state government, industry, environmentalists, worked together. After 18 months of work, the Council published its findings to be updated every 3 years to stay current with industry changes. States now had clear, written guidelines to judge the quality of their programs.
And it can be used by the states as a way of measuring their programs and determining whether their programs have the minimum elements to be effective.
Next, the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission created a new approach to apply these guidelines and improve E&P waste management regulation, state by state, the state review process.
A procedure by which they could critique, without being adversarial, the various exploration and production waste programs in the states in an effort to enhance those programs and to find model programs in states that could be transferred to other states that might not be as far along.
States were invited to voluntarily allow peers from other states to evaluate their programs. For example, for the Wyoming review, the IOGCC selected review team members from Kansas, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, and Illinois. The voices of the state's oil and gas industry, environmental groups, and federal regulators were heard as well.
I ended up being involved in the Arkansas review, Oklahoma, California, Pennsylvania. Together, industry, other interested parties, and the regulators can find the most cost-effective way of protecting the environment.
In overview, here's how the state review process works. First, a state agency responds to a detailed questionnaire developed by the Compact Commission. The questionnaire requires specific information on all aspects of the state's programs. The state's responses are sent to review team members for study in advance of the team's on-site visit. Team members spend a week in the state, meeting with state regulatory officials, asking in-depth questions. They explore how state programs are designed and learn about the conditions of oil and gas production that are unique to that state. Then the team writes detailed observations in a draft report, which is sent to the state and to federal, environmental, and industry observers for comment. At a final meeting, team members review the comments and complete their final report. This report identifies strengths and weaknesses and makes specific recommendations for improvement. The Compact Commission publishes the report for nationwide distribution. This networking informs states of the best regulatory solutions. The true power of the state review process comes from the cooperative, problem-solving environment created during the review. The review relies on voluntary participation rather than regulatory authority.
Well, to me, it's important that this review be voluntary because it shows the good faith effort and the commitment of each member state.
The review creates a team effort that is quite unlike the traditional regulatory rulemaking process.
Well, traditionally, it's been almost like a war. There's been different sides developed, people develop their battle strategy. It leaves winners and losers, but doesn't really protect the environment.
The review process sort of changes that. It says, okay, now the regulation is a tool and it serves functions, and we'll get knowledgeable people about how to use that tool in there to critique the regulatory process and the regulations themselves. That's a big, healthy change.
This team approach encourages open communication, allowing all viewpoints to be considered.
Essentially, a forum has been created with the express design of bringing diverse parties together to work in a non-confrontational atmosphere. Its effectiveness relies on persuasion, and that promotes dialogue. The entire emphasis is on problem solving by consensus.
There have been sort of short, by lawyer standards, written documents, but 15 to 20 pages circulated. People have critiqued them. Yours have been critiqued by other people. You've critiqued other people's.
There is a ground rule of the state review process that any criticism of a state program must be accompanied by a discussion of the reasons for finding the program element deficient, and also suggestions of ways to improve that program element.
You can't sit in a room with people for 10 days without, over time, without coming to appreciate that there is some logic behind their points of view and that they're, basically, most of them decent people.
In this cooperative environment, states can learn from each other. Like good news, good ideas travel fast from one state to another.
We've learned more or as much from other states going and reviewing their processes as when they came and reviewed ours. For instance, California had a workshop process in their water resources issues to bring the best available information together, and we watched how that workshop process developed in anticipation of doing a rulemaking. In Oklahoma, had a different type of process for crude spills, which we brought home to Texas and tried to adapt to our situation. So we've been very pleased with the information we've gained, how other states do things.
The regulation that comes out of the review is flexible, allowing those closest to the issue to determine what will work best. Take the question of how best to store salt water in climates as different as Wyoming and West Virginia.
The geology is different than many of the other states. The rocks are harder. The drilling is tougher. It's a very dry state. In fact, I think it's classified as a high desert. And if we have 10 to 12 inches a year, that's probably all we'll get. The pit that we saw today, if you notice, was lined completely because it's in sandy soil.
In West Virginia, conditions are different, so regulations are different.
We have 42 inches of rainfall each year, very little evaporative capacity. We have a very hilly terrain. We're the only state that's totally in the Appalachian region. And we have clay soil. We use tanks in West Virginia because the hilly terrain and the rainfall make it impractical to use pits for long-term storage of E&P waste.
The flexibility allowed by the state review process offers huge savings. According to a Department of Energy study, the state review approach to regulation saved up to $42 billion of initial costs and up to $8 billion each year. The IOGCC plans to continue this extremely successful model for state-to-state interaction. Since 1990, 14 states have been reviewed, representing more than 95% of the oil and gas production in the United States.
It would be wrong to think it was easy. It didn't just happen.
The collective power of the states is incredible.
That the states today are sophisticated and able to handle their own problems, certainly in the area of production waste, for example.
There are certainly very encouraging signs on the horizon about how well this has worked, about the states that have in fact had the reviews undergone and in fact have taken on most, if not all, of those corrections that have been identified. But the real proof will be, over time, are we able to achieve those real protections that all of us want in a way that makes better practical, common sense approaches to problems, common sense, cost-effective solutions. And we think that this has great promise.
To have sound public policy, the government unit closest to the people has to make the decision. And in this case, I think state and local government is very, very fitted in Oklahoma and other producing states to make those decisions.
For more information on the state review process, contact the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission, 900 Northeast 23rd Street, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 73105. Phone area code 405-525-3556 or fax 405-525-3592.